Hey my toys, this is Xbox Cheeto, and today I'll be telling you all about the first time I got high on the marijuana. So in high school, I wasn't much of an active drug user or partier like most other stickman channels out there. I was that nerd who would browse on the PCs during lunchtime about random shit, or I'd like to go for walks with friends, mostly having fires or going for coffee at Timmy's. One thing I liked to browse on a lot was Erowid, a site that ironically the school never got to clamp down on that effectively as their censorship filters got better and better throughout high school. I loved reading up on different stories and substances on Erowid and YouTube, and it was here that I first piqued my interest into the world of psychoactive substances. But since I was nerdy and had the masculine, autistic urge to know everything and anything I possibly could about my topics of interest, I also read into health-related topics of drugs. Long story short, I ended up coming up with a limit to not do any major drug until I reached the age of 25. But after that, I knew I'd go ham. This in the end didn't go to plan, but I still did my research on stuff I was going to do in general. So for the last few weeks before graduation, a friend had been telling me about this Montreal study that basically showed that people who started cannabis after the age of 17 had no brain developmental differences than those who never smoked at all. This was what made me finally decide to smoke it on my 18th birthday, knowing I was now in the clear. I went to a friend's who invited me, and he gave me to start a pre-roll from a local native reserve known for selling shit to people well under the legal limit of 19. Looking back, this was somewhat a crazy thing to smoke as a first time, because for whatever reason, every pre-roll I've ever smoked has been extremely strong. Maybe in America it is a different case, as people always seem to say on YouTube that they use bad quality bud, but I gotta guess that they pack them very tightly or something, because my own joints has just never matched up, and I've rolled my own quite a few times, especially last year. And my god, this was a big joint. I smoked it in the town my friend lived in near these falls where we had to go down this somewhat steep little edge to get to the spot. So after finishing it, I felt nothing initially for a minute or two, and then we went to go back up this ledge. I made it halfway, and then it hit me like a fucking truck on my brain. Quickly I noticed my vision going hazy, and I didn't feel my hands or legs going up this edge, and had to sort of intuit myself up it quick enough, or I knew I might not be able to make it up this edge in the end. So after I did finally get up, I quickly went to this rock and half-consciously slumped onto the fucking thing. So bam, I was down and out. My vision became like a hazy TV screen full of noise, and I could only barely make out my friend looking at me in shock, laughing his ass off. Slowly over the span of what felt like a few minutes, I kind of got my vision back to normal, and he was tired of waiting, and I could finally hear him now saying, okay, let's go. So I walked with him back to his house, with my vision still basically kind of fucked up, but it was getting better. So he ended up hitting this gravity bong with another friend for the rest of the night, where we eventually went for another walk before dark. I didn't need to smoke more out of this now terrifying looking bong, as if I thought if I was smoked from this simple joint, then I couldn't imagine how fucked I'd be from this bong, so I thought I'd leave that for another time. So in this whole quote-unquote trip, time was kind of weird because it felt as though every single moment I was in had a sort of specific time unit, so to say. There was these sort of moment points that were distinct and acted like miniature episodes of a show, you could say. I suppose this was caused by normal time dilation mixed in with a terrible short-term memory recall that made me view each moment as short but separate from one another, but that's just my hypothesis. So yeah, I wonder if this is what dementia feels like, because, I don't know, it kind of felt like I could kind of make sense in a moment, and then it'd be a new moment, like a whole new dimension almost. So, when we got back, we eventually watched a movie that I don't remember at all, and frankly, I found it boring because I was just sitting there, and I couldn't even follow the story due to my crappy memory and thinking. I don't tend to have couch lock either, I've noticed now, that I've smoked a lot more times. I ended up smoking more through my corncob pipe that I brought, and while I didn't get the same initial TV noise vision as my first smoke, it did prolong my high, I suppose. So this night was ironically not all that fun for me. In the entire time I thought, well, I've tried this now, and now I can say I did it and not do it again, but instead try other substances. So what actually piqued my interest in weed was what happened to me at night. So, the movie had ended, and I hadn't brought any earbuds, but I knew many on Erowid had said weed and music sound amazing. as most drugs really do. And so I asked if he had something that I could trance out to before sleeping. So he gave me some earbuds, and I played some Buckethead Datura, and some other trippy music that I kind of forget now. It sent me into a literal trip, where I had closed-eye visuals of these things I afterwards called the floaters. This may be caused by how weed puts pressure on your eyes, apparently, and makes floating around dead cells in your eye more prominent, I later read. But in this state, my mind assigned them a consciousness of their own, and they seemed geometric in nature. Not quite like a normal psychedelic, but they kind of looked like shapes, you could say, that sort of floated around. So I remember one looked like a mix between a 2D house and one of the old logos of the Child Network Treehouse, their logo, which is in itself a type of house, so I guess that makes sense. This thing floated around in my vision like a wave and told me many great things. I remember it told me my future in life, but I won't get into that. I don't know if it'll come to fruition, of course, but it was a neat experience all the same. I forget much of what else it told me, however, but I do feel like I came out of the experience feeling like it told me a lot of things, but that's all I kind of remember. I probably fell asleep somewhere within this state, and I later woke up in the middle of the night and realized I should probably go to bed and turn off the music. I know people will probably doubt me about this experience, as it's basically psychedelic in nature and seems very intense, but I have to note to you people that do doubt me that this was just my first time, and that every experience after got less and less intense. I did have pretty hallucinogenic-like experiences for another 2 years following this one, mostly for the reason that I'd always make sure to space out my experiences by at least 2 weeks or more, usually a month though, and I'd always try to push it on these experiences. I've at the time of recording this tried a small variety of other psychedelics now, including magic mushrooms, LSD, DMT, and Egyptian Blue Lotus. And I have to say that compared to all these substances that I've tried, my strongest experiences have been on weed, actually, so far. Of course, weed I've also done the most and probably in the highest doses. As for instance, I've only done DMT once, and it wasn't enough to break through on, unfortunately. But all in all, for anyone who claims weed isn't hallucinogenic and you can't trip on it, they most likely smoke too much, or they just never have done enough in a single experience to really understand how strong it can be. If you do want to try, however, then I'd suggest you take a month or two off as a break. Studies seem to show it should be clear from your system after about 2 weeks. I'd still say you should wait longer, as your brain may need more time to just reorientate itself. I mean, that's not scientific, but that'd just be like a safety thing I do, just because, you know, if you want to make sure you get as strong experience as possible, you want every factor going in favor of you. So, once it is time to smoke, though, you will still likely need more just to get there than you ever did on your first few times, as your brain, I feel it still reaches sort of a point of, like, perma-tolerance after a point. I've tried a few times to really push my high after going through a brief daily usage some year ago now, and I do find it harder than I once did, as I haven't even gone to these states of consciousness again, despite trying to use things like hash or dabs, even edibles. If you're some curious high schooler like I once was and are watching this, then take my advice as your best reason to not just wake and bake and do it daily, and, you know, maybe even hold off until after high school. Of course, I don't condone smoking in general, but if you will, then really consider why I say it's best to use it like once a month or twice. Because once you lose its hallucinogenic uses, I'm becoming increasingly convinced that it's sort of gone for good. If you're fine with that, though, then that's cool, too. I mean, it is pretty good for anxiety and other shit. Anyways, I'll be uploading more fucked up stories in the future. Namely, my hallucinogenic night walks on weed, and my fun times of using mushrooms while doing variously sketchy things. This stickman genre on YouTube has been kicking off lately, and I thought I'd get my slice in the pie, as I know I have worthy stories to tell now that I've read some others. If you're interested in this Hyperborean weed wizard's journey into Canada's frosty north, then I invite you to subscribe. Alhamdulillah, my Hashishian brethren.